Amy, Amy wished to offer her legs to Hero. Her ability was self-healing. She theorized that even if her legs were severed, they might grow back. Upon hearing this, Hero hurriedly told Amy, "Don't do it." But Amy was willing to give it a try. Annie came over, gently placing her hand on Amy's shoulder, and softly told her that even if she helped Hero stand up again, Hero wouldn't be happy after seeing Amy getting hurt. Suddenly, Manhwa spoke up, urging them not to argue, as she had a better idea. Manhwa mentioned that she had just turned 16 this year and they just had to wait 2 more years. By then, on the day of becoming of age, her ability would likely become stronger and possibly evolve to gain new abilities. She cheekily suggested that by then, not only Hero could grow a new pair of legs, but giving Hero another extra pair of legs wouldn't be a problem. The tense atmosphere dissipated and everyone chuckled. Ability evolution was an unfamiliar term to the new witches. Manhwa gave the textbook definition that it involved the condensation of magical energy within the body, transforming into something entirely new. Wondered if they hadn't seen it yet. Manhwa then smiled, saying, "Anyway, it's absolutely amazing, and if everyone studied hard, everyone could evolve new abilities." Listening to the young girl's enthusiastic explanation, 76 was shocked. If she hadn't misunderstood, the so-called ability evolution mentioned was precisely what was known as a high awakening. But she felt as if she was listening to some fantastical tale. Somehow the Witches' Union had several of these high awakening witches. In any case, this must have meant that the chances of encountering a chosen one seemed much higher. As night descended, after Roland had fallen asleep, Nightingale slipped into the mist, quietly leaving the castle. She headed towards the diplomatic building. The inspection during the afternoon hadn't revealed anything unusual. All 4 witches seemed normal. The only person who intrigued her was 76. Everything 76 said was truthful, yet something felt off. While everyone else had drifted off to sleep, the light was still on in 76's room. She was sitting at the edge of her bed, playing with a ring in her hand under the candlelight. Nightingale couldn't find anything suspicious about the ring and thought she might just be overly suspicious. Half an hour later, seeing 76 fell asleep, Nightingale left the room and extinguished the candle before she left. Soon, the room became very quiet. 76, observing the change in her ring, knew the person had left the room. Just half an hour earlier, she had seen a strong bright light through her ring and immediately knew someone was in her room, and likely to have an invisibility ability, and it was very powerful. She believed that it must have been a high awakening witch. Her combat power seemed to second only to the top 3 seats during the Federation. Either way, she had found her first high awakening witch. She stood up and opened the window, and though the chilling wind and snow swiped her face. However, just then, something unexpected happened. The ring in her hand suddenly began to tremble, as if resonating with something. Looking towards the castle, 76's heart thundered, and she stood frozen in place. She had never seen such a powerful beam of light. Clasping her hands tightly, she prayed that she had finally found the chosen one. Meanwhile, Roland found himself back in the dream world, yawning as he brushed his teeth in the bathroom alongside Zero. Seeing their reflections in the mirror, one tall and one short, squeezed in front of the narrow sink, Roland laughed and suddenly found the dream quite amusing. Zero turned to ask what Roland was laughing about. Roland jokingly said he was laughing at Zero's short stature. Zero pouted and kicked Roland on the legs. She then told him to dress up properly since today was her parent-teacher meeting. Since Zero's parents weren't around, Roland needed to attend. Watching Zero comb her hair, Roland suggested that twin ponytails would suit her better, only to be promptly pushed out of the bathroom by Zero. Shaking his head, Roland waited until Zero was ready, backpack slung over her shoulder. She had changed into a black short-sleeved shirt paired with a skirt, complemented by white stockings and sneakers, giving her a youthful and charming look. Her soft white hair was tied into twin ponytails resting on her shoulders, making her look incredibly cute. Upon arriving at the school, Roland was greeted with a crisp female voice saying, "You again?" He turned his head to find that it was Garcia sitting next to him. Roland pointed to the Zero's Guardian sign on the chair. Garcia, noticing the name on the note, then sat down. Roland curiously asked her if she had a child, to which Garcia coldly replied that it was her cousin. For some reason, Roland felt that Garcia's attitude towards him had changed since their first encounter. Although still impatient, she seemed to be much nicer to him. Soon, the teacher began to talk. Garcia passed Roland a note asking if he was the martial fighter from earlier. Roland was puzzled about how she knew but didn't answer. Garcia then wrote another note insisting she could feel it and told him not to lie. Roland realized why Garcia's attitude towards him had shifted. He considered denying it but then thought better of it, hoping to learn more about this world from Garcia. Communicating through notes was cumbersome, so they decided to talk properly somewhere else. They ended up at Garcia's house. Seeing pink rabbit slippers on the floor, Roland hesitated but eventually put them on. Garcia poured him a glass of water, and Roland asked about her cousin. Garcia revealed she wasn't close to her cousin, or, in fact, the entire family. She sees them as her enemies. Roland was surprised to learn that Garcia's family, a prominent family, had always wanted to demolish this area to build skyscrapers and malls, and had even sent her cousin here to persuade Garcia to leave. Garcia found it strange that Roland didn't know anything about this, as it was common knowledge among the locals. Roland quickly made up an excuse. He then inquired about Garcia's recent competitions. Garcia explained that the purpose of these fights wasn't just to showcase martial arts or win prize money, but to combat what she called external corruption. Roland was slightly confused. Garcia further clarified that only martial fighters could fight the corrupted, and external corruption was the main reason for turning normal people into these corrupted beings. Roland gulped, a sense of unease rising within him. His dream world is being corrupted? Garcia added she would only reveal more if Roland joined the Martial Fighter Association, as not everyone with awakening abilities would side with the martial fighters. Roland felt a chill. In other words, if he was confirmed to have awakened abilities but refused to join the association, would he be seen as a natural enemy? Just then, Garcia's phone rang, and she went to another room to answer it. Roland immediately stood up, slipped off the bunny slippers, and walked barefoot to the end of the hallway. He entered the storage room, where he found the exact same metal door. Clearly, it had never been opened before. Roland took a deep breath and gently cracked open the door. The salty scent of seawater rushed into his nostrils, and the sound of the horns of the ship was loud and clear. The next morning, Roland woke up with excitement, energetically punching the air in his bed. He was correct, every resident in the apartment seemed to have a door leading to their fragmented memories. These doors likely connected to a place each person held dearest. Garcia's last memories were the green waterport, her life's work, and the starting point of her quest for power. Although Roland didn't enter the door, he later asked Garcia about it. However, Garcia seemed confused and clueless about what Roland was talking about. Perhaps in the apartment, only Roland could access these doors. After freshening up, Roland headed to the office where Wendy walked in, handing him information about the new witches. As Roland browsed through them, his eyes eventually settled on Annie's name. Nightingale reminded him that this might be the Annie that Iffy had mentioned. Annie was a very common name, but the information here clearly recorded her search for the blood fawn and was declined, making it highly likely the Annie they were thinking about. But confirmation would come a week later when Tilly and the others arrived in Neverwinter. Wendy expressed her happiness about Iffy and Annie finally going to reunite. Roland, however, thought otherwise, wondering how they would get along after their reunion. He can only hope that only time would heal everything. He then raised his head to inquire about the day's schedule from Wendy, who nodded and laid out the day's agenda. Roland asked Wendy to bring Lightning and Maisie along and then inquired about her opinion on 76. He sipped his tea. Normally a common folk who were redeemed slaves wouldn't attract his attention, but York had praised her highly. According to Wendy, 76 got along well with the 4 witches, and Wendy believed she wasn't a bad person, or else she wouldn't have sacrificed herself to save the witches. Roland agreed with this view and then asked Wendy what she thought about employing 76 at the Witches' Union. Wendy smiled and said if 76 was willing, she had no objections. Suddenly, Nightingale appeared and interrupted, advising Roland not to assign any position to her just yet. Puzzled, Roland asked Nightingale why. She hesitated, unable to pinpoint a reason, but felt something was off. Roland looked at Nightingale for a moment and then nodded, agreeing to put the matter aside for now. After Wendy bowed and left, Nightingale, appearing slightly worried, held Roland's hand. She apologized, wondering if she had overstepped. Roland patted her hand, understanding she was concerned about security. He pulled Nightingale closer and softly assured her that the safety of Neverwinter and himself was her responsibility, and she had done nothing wrong. However, Roland was curious if something had gone wrong during the previous inspection. Nightingale, standing so close to Roland, felt a bit shy. She blushed while saying she had detected using her ability that what 76 said was truthful, but her reactions to strangers were not typical of a common slave. Nightingale needed more time to observe. The next morning, in the diplomatic building, 76 entered the living room to find the witches already gathered. Amy greeted her cheerfully with a good morning, and they all sat down for breakfast at the round table. Amy excitedly talked about the lavish breakfast. 76, seeing Amy's joyful face, feigned her smile and sat next to her, picking up a fork to eat. She still looked somewhat weak, but the sight of Amy and the other smiling faces brought her back to Takira. This group of witches who had struggled daily for survival had finally found a sanctuary. Perhaps this place would soon become the new Takira, where the witches would rise again. Amy touched 76's cheek, noticing her dark circles, and asked if she hadn't rested well. 76 smiled and said she was too excited last night to sleep. Amy, concerned, suggested she should go back and get some more rest. However, 76 shook her head and mentioned her desire to join everyone later to familiarize the city of Neverwinter, as she didn't want to be left behind alone. Everyone nodded, and after chatting for a while, Wendy walked in, pushing a wheelchair that Anna and Soraya had worked overnight to make. This would allow Hero to move freely within a limited area. Hearing Anna's name, 76 was taken aback. Manhwa had also mentioned this name, apparently one of the highly awakened witches. She was surprised that such a powerful witch would do something like this for an ordinary witch who had lost her legs. Wendy helped Hero onto a wheelchair to help her get accustomed to it, and Hero's voice was choked with emotion thanking Wendy. Wendy gently told her that there was no need to say thanks to the witch union, as everyone here is sisters. Annie came over, bringing up 76's desire to join them. She said if 76 was left alone, she would feel lonely. Wendy thought for a moment, then glanced at 76. 76 suddenly felt uneasy. Why was Wendy hesitating? Was the inspection not over yet? Then, Wendy smiled and agreed to the request. Seeing the two of them, Annie seemed to sense something but didn't speak further. Wendy introduced the day's first destination, the core area of Neverwinter, the northern slope mine. The witches were stunned. 76 wondered what was so interesting about a mine. Could it be that Wendy wanted to show them they'd be sent there if they didn't obey the rules? However, according to Wendy, that wasn't the case, as Wendy explained that it was the heart of Neverwinter. She quoted Roland, saying that whoever could produce more steel represented true justice. Wendy smiled, assuring them it might sound like gibberish, but they would eventually understand. As they left the diplomatic building, Wendy gave a brief overview of witch knowledge. She first mentioned magical backlash, a common experience for all witches. Speaking of which, Wendy suddenly reflected on the sisters back in the association days and those who hadn't survived it. Then she spoke about the evolution of abilities after a witch reaches adulthood, including the potential to develop branch abilities and increased magical power. Amy asked several questions, and Wendy lovingly answered each one, affectionately patting the young girl's head. Wendy shared that this wasn't the endpoint for a witch's powers. They could continue to evolve without limit, independent of their original abilities, as long as they kept deepening their understanding of themselves and their magic. 76 was surprised, as it was obvious the four witches were hearing this for the first time. In Takira, everything mentioned here was common knowledge, so why had the church hidden this information? Had the witches that created the church in these past 400 years strayed from the will of Lady Acaris? When 76 looked up upon hearing Wendy's voice again, she surprisingly saw a communication magic seal. She thought it might have been found in one of the ancient ruins. Suddenly, 76's ring on her neck heated up. She looked up to see a blonde girl and a pigeon in the sky. They greeted the new witches and introduced themselves. Amy was incredulous to see a talking pigeon. Wendy extended her arm for the pigeon, and Maisie happily landed on her arms to perch on. When 76 learned that this pigeon was a highly awakened witch, she was momentarily stunned. To her shock, she watched as the pigeon affectionately rubbed against Wendy's cheek. Wait a second, could this really be a high awakened witch? Back in Takira, high awakened witches were in the upper echelon of the Federation. Could this seemingly silly pigeon really be a high awakened witch? Amy marveled, after learning that Maisie was very powerful. Maisie cooed a couple of times in response and flapped her wings as if saying that's right. Lightning, not to be outdone, said that once she turns 18, she would definitely evolve into an even more powerful new ability. Amy's eyes sparkled as she asked about Maisie's evolved powers. Lightning suggested that Maisie could turn into a huge bird creature, very fierce but not as cute. Upon hearing this, all of the witches were all curious. 76 on the side thought to herself how times had changed. Why did the witches care about cuteness over fierceness? The end goal of combat witches was how strong they were, not how they looked. She believed the witches here had got it all wrong. Perhaps their concept of high awakening might be entirely different from what she had in mind. Although this question might slightly increase the risk of exposing her identity, 76 couldn't hold back her curiosity anymore. She turned to Wendy and asked how to determine if a witch's ability had evolved. Wendy explained that it's discernible through magical energy. After a witch's ability evolves, her magic core inside their body will shape into a new form. For example, Maisie's magical core now took the shape of sprawling white wings. 76 was astonished, then nodded, recognizing what Wendy said as identical to that of the Federation. It seemed the pigeon truly was a high awakened witch. She then questioned what Wendy's magical core looked like. Learning that Wendy was still an ordinary witch without evolved powers surprised her even more. She couldn't believe that an ordinary witch had become the head of the entire witch union, and even high awakened witches showed this much respect to her. She marveled once again at how much the times had changed. On their way, 76 noticed through her ring that neither Wendy, Lightning, nor Maisie were the chosen ones. Upon entering the northern slope mine, the noise of bustling activity grew louder. Workers were everywhere. Lightning was the first to enter the mine, urging everyone to keep up. Wendy paused to share the history of Border Town, including the struggles before Roland's arrival. People couldn't cope with the month of the demons. It all changed until Roland saved a witch named Anna and opened a new chapter of cooperation between witches and commoners. This place, Wendy proudly declared, was the real holy mountain for witches. After her brief history lesson, Wendy led them to meet Anna. Wendy called Anna the busiest witch in the union and the only witch who had evolved her ability twice. 76's heart skipped a beat at this revelation. They passed a narrow path guarded by numerous guards and soldiers and arrived at a gate. Wendy explained it was Anna's workplace, secured by Roland to ensure her safety. 76 thought there might be a hint of surveillance in this so-called protection. Perhaps the lord of this place still didn't trust the witches. As the gate opened, a lively young girl, Ling, greeted Wendy. Wendy affectionately touched Ling's head, asking about her sister. Ling replied that Lucia was doing machine tool testing with Anna. Wendy introduced the new witches to Ling and Lucia. After learning that Lucia's ability had evolved at adulthood and her magical power was second only to Anna, and Lucia is one of the few witches in the witches union that could utilize the divine seal imprint. 76 nearly stumbled. Amy curiously asked what the divine seal imprint was. Wendy patiently explained it was a weapon requiring immense magical power to use. Only 4 witches could light up the 4 magic stones on it, so Roland left it in the castle hall, and once they joined the witches union they can all test their magical power on the divine seal imprint. Wendy smiled, saying everyone was wondering who would be the 5th to light up all 4 stones. To 76, this sounded like a fantastical tale. She couldn't fathom how the Witch Union acquired the Divine Seal imprint. This was an item that back in the Takira era was untouchable except by the top 3 seats in the Federation. And somehow, in this isolated little place, for witches could activate it, and the lord of this place had the audacity to place such a powerful and dangerous yet treacherous item in the castle hall? Broken Sword's question interrupted her thoughts. She inquired how many in the Witch Union had evolved their abilities. Wendy counted on her fingers and cheerfully announced a total of 10. 76 lost count of how many times she has been stunned today. Just then, one of the doors opened, and Agatha walked out. After greeting Wendy, Agatha carried her tubes and beakers into another room. 76 was struck at the sight of the blue-haired witch. She suddenly remembered a moment from over 400 years ago, Takira's youngest high-awakened witch. Although she had forgotten her name, but Agatha's face had sealed in her memories. She couldn't believe Agatha had survived until now. Struggling to control her impulse to approach her, 76 knew she had to find Agatha and speak to her. As evening approached, Nightingale and Sylvie stood in the castle, gazing out the window. Sylvie saw 76 leaving the diplomatic building, leaping out from a second-floor window. Nightingale's intuition was right, there was indeed something amiss with 76. She instructed Sylvie to continue monitoring while she went to find Roland. After arriving at the office, Roland, intrigued, closed his book, surprised that an ordinary person managed to evade Nightingale's lie detection. Meanwhile, Sylvie kept reporting 76's movements until she stopped, seemingly waiting for someone, but without carrying any weapons. Nightingale began to analyze what 76's intentions might be. Sylvie continued reporting, urgently saying that 76's target seemed to be Agatha. Suddenly, in disbelief, she exclaimed that there was a Stone of God punishment reaction on 76. This news made both Nightingale and Roland anxious. As Roland instructed Nightingale to hurry to the scene. Minutes earlier, as Agatha finished her day's work and headed towards the castle, she suddenly sensed someone approaching her from behind. There shouldn't be anyone here at this time, so she didn't hesitate to turn and used her ability, freezing the intruder's feet. However, the ice first landed on the woman's legs and then vanished. Her heart sank, thinking this must have been the power of the Stone of God punishment, but something felt off. As the person in front of her steadily approached, Agatha braced herself for an attack. But the women's action stunned her. This person was performing a courtesy from the Takira era. Agatha couldn't help but ask who she was. 76 slowly said, "Greetings to you, the youngest high-awakened witch, Lady Agatha." The two entered a local tavern and headed upstairs. Agatha observed the bustling noise in the pub's main hall, surprised that 76 didn't choose a more quiet place. Once inside a room, 76 closed the door and bowed again to Agatha, explaining that pubs have always been great places for exchanging information and building connections. She poured a glass of wine for Agatha. 76 thought this place might lower Agatha's guard to some extent. More importantly, she wanted to make clear that she harbored no hostility towards Agatha herself, the city of Neverwinter, or the Witch Union. Her sole purpose was to find the chosen one. Agatha wanted to know how 76 found her. 76 had asked the new witches to ask Wendy and gathered information about Agatha's workplace, her return times to the castle, and her route back. When she learned that Agatha was part of the Witch Union, she decided to make contact. Agatha nodded, and set down her glass and asked if other witches like her had also survived. 76 fell silent for a moment, then shook her head, saying yes, however, they can no longer call themselves witches. Their bodies couldn't be preserved for hundreds of years, they had to find other ways to continue their existence. She admitted that she was a soul residing in a God Punishment Army warrior's body. Agatha then understood how 76 had made her abilities ineffective just minutes ago. 76 explained that this was Lady Acris's ultimate product, were merging a witch with a powerful mortal to create a God Punishment warrior capable of contending with demons. By transferring the witch's soul to the body at the final moment of the ritual was the perfect product, the most powerful and extraordinary warrior. Agatha, deep in thought, closed her eyes and then put her drink down again, reflecting that she always knew Acris's plan wouldn't be as simple as the previous God Punishment warriors they met were nothing but soulless tools. She then looked at 76, her tone seemed to suggest that the survivors might not agree with this method. Before answering the question, 76 first wanted to ask Agatha something she considered very important. Agatha gazed at her intently and nodded for her to proceed. 76 asked if Agatha had informed the Witch Union about the demons, the Divine War, and the Witches' Union. Agatha nodded in affirmation. Excited, 76 inquired about their reaction. Agatha shared that everyone had accepted this reality and were all working hard and preparing for the Third Divine War. She also mentioned how the Witch Union had jointly defeated a magic slayer and several other demons. 76 felt a surge of excitement, realizing that the Witch Union shared the same goals as Takira, meaning she no longer needed to hide her identity. Without hesitation, 76 enthusiastically described what happened after the fall of Takira and her goal of searching for the chosen one, who could activate a powerful instrument to obliterate all of the demons once and for all. And this very witch was currently in the castle. Agatha was momentarily stunned, hardly believing something like this was possible. 76 then removed her ring and handed it to Agatha, seeking her help. She explained the ring's purpose and the method to identify the chosen one. Agatha put on the ring, glancing in a certain direction. After examining the ring, she seriously suggested to 76 that they should talk to the Lord of Neverwinter. 76 nodded and said she would find the time to talk with Wendy, then suddenly she paused, surprised, and asked, "The Lord of Neverwinter? The mortal king of this place?" Agatha nodded and said although Roland Wimbledon was seemingly ordinary, a bit clumsy, and a mortal being, he was indeed the core of the Witch Union. Agatha's lips curled into a smile, which puzzled 76. Agatha understood 76's concerns, as she had felt the same way initially. She briefly shared her insights and experiences in Neverwinter, and how she realized that without Roland, there would be no Witch Union, no city of Neverwinter, and Great Castle, yet certainly unable to defeat the church. Recalling the day they defeated the demons and returned, and everyone hugged Roland at the dock, Agatha felt a warmth in her heart and a rare smile appeared on her face. She earnestly told 76 that any plan she had must be discussed with Roland. 76 was still hesitant, but Agatha chuckled, reassuring her that Roland knew more than she might expect. Agatha asked 76 to guess what Roland had told her when she first woke up to find that 400 years had passed and both the Federation and Takira no longer existed, leaving her heartbroken and lost. Agatha vividly recalled, saying that Roland turned around with a solemn tone and confidently told her that mortals could defeat the demons. 76 shook her head, thinking this was too. Before she could finish, Agatha interrupted, arrogant? Overconfident? Agatha smiled, admitting she initially thought the same. But in reality, during her time with Roland, she saw hope, and all of the witches of Neverwinter were even more convinced of this. Roland was everyone's pillar of strength. She returned the ring to 76 and told her that whatever she and Takira planned for collaborating with the Witch Union, she would need Roland's approval. 76 was momentarily skeptical, unable to understand why Agatha, once a high and mighty figure from the Takira era, would place such trust in a mortal king. After a moment of silence, 76 said she would consider it. She stood up, bowed to Agatha again, and then left the room. After closing the door, Agatha spoke in a direction, saying she could come out now. Following her words, Nightingale emerged from the mist. Nightingale curiously asked how Agatha knew she was here, and Agatha explained it was through the ring 76 had given her. Agatha poured a glass of wine for Nightingale and discussed the ring's unique ability to see light pillars, noting that Nightingale's light illuminated half of the room. Nightingale nodded, realizing 76 must have also known she was here, but didn't mind revealing her identity. Nightingale asked if Agatha believed her story. Agatha smiled and nodded, but Nightingale pointed out that Agatha didn't take the ring. Agatha finished the cheap wine in one gulp, turned to Nightingale, and said earnestly that she hoped to guide 76 onto the right path. Nightingale was silent for a moment before vanishing into the mist again. Before leaving, she expressed her hope that 76 would make the right decision. Agatha smiled and said she believed she would.